Well, hello, and welcome to another episode of the Imperfect Men's Club podcast. My name is Mark Aylward, and I'm here as always with my good friend, colleague, and co-host Jim Gurley. And once again, in the pregame, Jim brought a topic to the table that I think you'll find intriguing. We enjoyed the pregame, and it was a podcast by a fairly well-known faith-based motivational guy, John Maxwell. Probably that descriptor doesn't do him justice. I'm sure he does a lot more than that, but he's been around a long time. A lot of people follow him. He's a very credible resource. And Jim, he was talking about seasons and the fact that we all have a book in ourselves, and the topic of leadership just kept popping up, kept bubbling to the surface in the pregame. So I think leadership is what we're going to go, and then we have some interesting kind of ancillary places to go related to leadership, like the four seasons and seasons of life and such. So, Jim, tell us a little bit about Mr. Maxwell and how this triggered the topic.
Yeah, Mark, as you said, this is a name it's been around for decades. I remember reading his books, geez, probably back in the 90s or 80s, some of his stuff. I think he's more of a faith-based leader, but he's turned it into a more of a business. And he has a number of different books, but one of them that I remember was something to do with the seasons. We have different seasons in our lives, and of course, this is the first week of fall. This Monday was the last, or Sunday was the last day of summer 2025, and the conversation about seasons have been coming up a lot. And everything in life is a season. I think I told you it's kind of funny. My high school mascot was the Hayward Farmers, which was the worst mascot you could ever have, especially at 15 years old, right? What is a farmer? I think it took me every bit of my life. Just recently, I had this epiphany that, hey, maybe this whole farmer things means something. What
Yeah.
does it mean to be a farmer? The mighty farmers, and what it meant was to be a farmer. You had to plan. You had to be resilient. You had to deal with the climates, and so even though it was a football season or a basketball season or a baseball season, we have seasons. But one thing we do know about the farmer season is that if you every season has you have to do something, and you work and you work and you work hard with no guarantees that you'll get a harvest. And
Hmm.
the only guarantee is that if you don't prepare for the next season, then nothing will come out of that ground.
Hmm.
So just recently, I've had conversations with people that are in their winter. It's a dark time, and that winter, I try to use the analogy. It's I think one of the best ones. Remember, in order to have a harvest, you need a soil uh, fertile ground, and the most fertile ground, the soil, comes from manure, and the
Hmm.
manure is all the shit, all the
Hmm.
stuff that gets plowed back into the soil, because without fertile ground, then nothing grows. And then what do you need after good soil? You need uh, you need a dark winter, a rainy, cold winter,
Hmm.
and that rain is life. And then when after that, what happens? Then spring comes, some sun. Of course,
Hmm.
you have to put the seeds in the ground, because if you don't put the seeds in the ground, nothing's going to grow.
Hmm.
And and then here comes summer, and things start to grow. And
Yeah, it's
but all there's
interesting.
one left, right? There's then the fall.
Yeah, yeah,
What's the fall? That's the harvest,
yeah, and or
and then
the
it starts all over again.
and the
And
leaves
so
falling out of the trees, yeah, shedding themselves. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah. No,
so
it is the analogy of life being seasonal as well is interesting. And you referred to someone going through their winter right now. I can cite my winter pretty specifically as, about a 10-year period. And I think during that time, one of the things that was very helpful was to be reminded over and over that this too shall pass. This season
mhm,
will
mhm,
end and a new season
mhm,
will begin, and just hang in there. And
mhm,
that related to the work I'm doing now, spend my
mhm,
life, helping people find better work. Now I'm spending my life helping men overcome hardship because
mhm,
I figured out how to do that. And I don't remember having a whole lot of help. I had a lot of love and support, but there weren't resources around saying, if you're going through this as a man, here's a resource for you. They just
mhm,
didn't exist. They're popping up
mhm,
now as
mhm,
men are starting to
uh,
discover that it's not a bad thing to talk about stuff. You can talk
Yeah.
about stuff, but the
Yeah, well,
season,
this where this rolls into leadership, and just again, just going back on, there was no guarantee, right, that you're going to get a good harvest. I think
mhm,
that's the one thing we have to remind ourselves. Sometimes there's back to back, really poor um, harvest, and you keep showing up, you learn by what you did wrong, and you sometimes you just don't have control. You don't have control of the conditions. You don't have control. There's a lot of factors that we can't control, and
mhm.
farmers are the ones that you have to, you know, do the best you can based on your past experiences of planning ahead and the hopes. But one thing is assured is that if you don't do those things, nothing happens, nothing will grow. If you don't get the seed in the ground, and if you don't plow the soil, and if you don't it doesn't, the winter doesn't come, you're not going to get anything. So now, like I said, we use sports analogies a lot. Now it's just math, right? Because uh, we go off the 4 seasons, and those 4 seasons are 90 days apiece, right? So on average, the longest season actually is summer. It has a couple extra days, but now it's really just, what are we going to do? We're just about 100 days away from the first of the year. So we're within the 100 days. I think it'd be yesterday or the day before. And so we have 98 days left in the year. And now it's just math. Everything is math. Everything. And same with a football season, a rugby season, a baseball season, a basketball season. Typically, it's a 90-day season with a preseason, a postseason, and but in business and leadership, the podcast was talking about write your own story, and you're everybody has a story in them. The question is, at what season, who do you want to write it for, um, and what are you going to write? So this I think you'll appreciate this, Mark. So because you're a leadership guy, right? We talked about leadership. You were a leader in your business. You were a leader on the basketball court. You were a leader on the baseball field, and then you had to be a leader for your family. But the way that what resonated me with what John Maxwell was saying this morning was, uh, if you can write your story, who you're writing it for. And then he went straight to what we all think of, because I just happened to go to a funeral service, went to a lot of events in the summer, just reflecting on that. And that's really in the end what we want. We want um, the people that we care about to know that we had an impact on their life and what they'll say at our service. And then that's the story in us that we all want to tell before, our time is done. And then
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Well, we were talking. It's interesting because we were talking. We weren't talking about my dad, but as I've said to many times, he just turned 97. So
Mm-hmm.
he likely will. And my older brother and I have been speaking about the circumstance surrounding his demise, from the financial to the funeral to the arrangements, and
Mm-hmm.
because we have to prepare for that, because that's the prudent
Yeah.
thing to do, as much as we don't want to talk. And then you turn around and you look at a kid like Charlie Kirk, who's
Yeah.
he's done
Yeah.
it. He's done it 31. My dad got
Mm-hmm.
two more lifetimes.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think both of those guys are leaving a pretty good story behind,
Mm-hmm.
if and when my dad
Mm-hmm.
does. But
Yeah.
yeah, and
Well, touch on that for a minute. I don't want to get too off topic, but I did watch less than probably 30 minutes of Charlie Kirk's service. Again, we're not here to talk about the politics of it, but it was a remarkable service to fill up a football stadium and another stadium in a short 31 years, and then to have the president of the United States, among probably some of the greatest, let's just say, leaders of our time, say those things about you at 31 years old. I mean, could there be a better example of somebody that wrote their own story and told it in a short 31 years? And look at the nice
yeah,
things they said about that young man. It was remarkable.
yeah, and how many different people
Yeah.
of great accomplishment, of
Mm.
great notoriety, spoke
Yeah.
highly of him. He was a special guy. But yeah, I mean, and look at how many leaders he left behind. I mean,
Yeah.
his
Yeah.
whole I don't think anyone doubts that those institutions that he started from scratch are going to go on,
Yeah.
and they're going to increase, and they're going to improve, and they're going to do more good things.
Yeah.
Everyone was kind of
But
rallying around that. And
but
that's
but why
part of
was
what a
he
leader
effective?
does.
He was effective because, one, he was unapologetic about his message, and he also had he really had a unique ability to have a conversation with people that wanted to disagree with him.
Yes.
And and obviously he was a super bright young man. Of course, I think I said it last week's episode. He's autodidactic, meaning that he's self-taught. He
Hmm.
has same education as me, high school education, but he's self-educated, and he really was able to uh, aggregate and curate the data in a way that was somewhat undisputable at times, and that's why they
Well, you
killed
know,
him.
he was many things, but I think in the context of leadership, which I believe he absolutely was a great leader, is he took responsibility for things.
Hmm.
He stood for things. He consistently showed up.
Hmm.
He never asked people to do things he wasn't willing to do himself or hadn't
Hmm.
already done himself.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
I think that what we're talking about in the pregame is the other side of leadership, which is just the lack of leadership that we've
Hmm.
experienced up until pretty recently. We've got some pretty good rising stars right now, but I
Hmm.
think the people that were running the show, I used to say all the time, Jim, you heard me say it a million times. I'm not going to use the word leader. I'm going to say that's a person in a position of authority, but that's not a
Hmm.
leader. Okay. And I
Hmm.
think the leadership word gets thrown around too much. We're calling people leaders that aren't leaders. They're just
Hmm.
unfortunately in charge of something at the time.
Yeah.
I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah. 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 To add to what you're saying, Mark, an elected politician we see as a leader. And I think we have some really, really bad examples of leaders, especially in politics, whether it's on the red team or the blue team or whatever team. It's very sad to see we've come to that. Another thing that he said was, well, great leaders um, have the ability uh, to tell a story, and their story obviously comes from something that they lived through. I thought this was interesting, and I'll speak for myself. I think to be an effective leader, you have to have some humility. Some humility. I mean, that you lived a life uh, of maybe some pain that you can share. And so I think you'll appreciate this. There's different stages and when you'll tell your stories. And this is John Maxwell talking about the different seasons you would tell a story. I won't go through the exact quote, but there's a quote. It's the four different seasons you tell your stories. When you're hurt enough, you'll tell your story. When you were really hurt, uh, that's a story. When you seen enough, that inspires you. You've seen something happen enough where it inspired you to tell a story and be a leader. The other one is when you've learned enough, when you've learned a subject matter or something so much that you're inspired to tell your story. And then the other one, the last one, is the fourth season, which is when you've received enough. It means that you're living in a state of gratitude and gratefulness, and you've received so much. Now you're ready to tell a story, and then
Give
that's
back, yeah, give back
yeah.
in the form of a
So
story. Yeah, I can cite all four of those experiences,
mm.
and I think some of it's, of course, because I'm 64 years old. I just been around a long time, so
I'm glad you said that.
shit
Yeah,
happens, but
yeah.
yeah, I think the hurt enough certainly, learned enough. I feel much wiser than I was as a young man for sure, and yeah, I think all four of those seasons have touched me. And I've had a lot of people tell me, I'm sure you have too, you should write a book. And I'm like,
Yep.
yeah, well, apparently I've got four books in me, and that's a lot of work. I think I probably will, Joe. I think I probably will. But from a leadership standpoint, again, I think there's so many things about leadership, and we were talking a little bit earlier about the fact, are they born or are they made? And I
Hmm.
I am of the opinion that they can be both. I think that I was a leader from a very young age, probably because my father was. He was the captain. He was he ran everything, ran the
Hmm.
family, ran the airplane. He ran everything, and in
Hmm.
the church and volunteer stuff. And
Yeah, you were around a great leader. You were raised by a great
I
leader.
was raised
Yeah.
by a great leader, and my older brother's a great leader as well. And so I think some
Hmm.
of that was just innate. However,
Yep.
as I've investigated hundreds and thousands of companies over 35 years of helping them try to hire people, which is an interesting lens. I
It is.
engaged with people in leadership positions all the time. And I
Yeah,
found that a
I
very
think about it from
small,
both directions, not just from the one they're trying to hire, but from the management team that's looking for the right match. So it's an
quite
interesting
often,
perspective.
the C-suite. And I always say to people,
Mhm,
you know, the way companies hire people is the way they do everything. And
mhm,
there weren't a lot of leaders in that group of leadership people. You know,
interesting.
there were some, and they stood out because of something that you said earlier. They that you remembered how they made you feel. They made you feel good in a certain way, appreciated, wise, thankful, you know, interesting, whatever it was. They were like, okay, well, I could
Mhm,
take this relationship offline, and this could be a friendship. You know, I don't
mhm,
have the bandwidth for it right now, and they're,
mhm,
you know, 1,000 miles away. I had to get on a plane to visit them, but this is the kind of person, because he or she is making me feel good about who I
mhm,
am, and
mhm.
that's what leaders do. You
Yeah, it's
know?
the impact that a leader has.
Yeah.
It's again, it's they don't remember what you said. They remember the way you made them feel, and what the way you made them feel was you made them feel meaningful. They felt they mattered, and they could have an impact on an industry or in their position. And that's what the best leaders do. They have a way of making you feel like you can you can have an impact. You can do this, and
Yeah, you know, as much as I'm not a Bill Clinton fan, he has a reputation, and I've met
oh
a couple of these people. My father's like this.
yeah,
They, when you're talking to them personally, face
yeah,
to face, they make you feel like you're the only person on
yes.
the face of the earth.
Yeah, yeah.
You
I've
know?
heard that about Bill Clinton too. He was one
Yeah,
of the few individuals where you walk in a room and he doesn't matter who you were, you felt like $1 million being next to him.
yeah,
He had that energy. Probably
yeah.
one of the best leaders we've ever had, natural leaders.
Yeah, and I don't. I mean, I disagree with him on quite a few different things, but I'll give him that. And I mean, some
Yeah,
people I suppose would call that charisma, but
yeah, yeah.
it's more than that. That's part of it. It's more than that
Mhm.
though. It's
But
like,
my understanding, I've met somebody that met him. It's a whole other episode, but he was sincere. He was not he wasn't a narcissist. You know, he
no, I
really
think he genuinely liked people.
he
I
did.
do. I
Yeah.
think he genuinely liked people. His peccadillos were sexual and political in my, but you know,
They kind of are one of the same things at times. That's another episode too. It takes
you know,
one to know one, right?
there's a lot of talk in the well, in the commercial world, in the corporate world, about, you know, toxic bosses and
Mhm,
toxic cultures and lack of leadership and what a leader is. It's just a hot topic, and on
yeah.
LinkedIn in particular. And so I got a lot of noise around it. I've got a lot of other people's opinions around it. And I think, generally speaking, the thing that surprises me most is that what a leader is somehow not something that everyone understands. Like if there's a toxic boss, like, who's tolerating the toxic
Yeah.
boss? You know, from above and below. You know,
Mhm,
someone's allowing this to go on. So,
mhm.
you know, the we can influence our leaders as well. You know, because
Well,
I
you
think
brought
that,
something interesting. Is it charisma? You know, charisma is an energy. Everything is an energy. So our great leaders, they have great energy and they can convey uh, optimism and make you feel a certain way. Is yeah,
yeah,
but
I don't think you have to be extroverted particularly. I think you
mhm,
can be introverted, like particularly if you're managing, you know, technology assets, for instance.
mhm,
If you're crunching numbers, you know, maybe you need less of that. But I think that they make you feel important. They
mhm,
make you feel heard. Um, they make you feel supported, and yeah, I think empathetic listening skills. I think great leaders talk less than they listen,
mhm, mhm,
and I think they model behavior. I think that they, particularly around things like that are kind of esoteric, like culture and mission and vision. Great leaders, they are fans of all of those things. And the other thing that strikes me is they're clear, right?
mhm,
When they tell
mhm.
you about something, or when they set an
Yeah, the messaging is
expectation,
clear. Yeah.
I know exactly what you want me to do. I know
Yeah.
exactly what's expected of me.
Mhm,
And in the absence of that, entities will crumble, right? Because
mhm,
you got people moving in different directions or unclear. When someone is this is a big part of what I'm doing now too, Jim. When someone is unclear, like, I don't know what to do next,
mhm,
or I don't know why this is happening, that creates tremendous anxiety. And so
Mhm.
when you can bring clarity to someone who is unclear, now you've started the process of building confidence. And,
Mhm.
and in my estimation, when you start building confidence or rebuilding confidence in my circumstance,
Mhm.
then you start to become perhaps more courageous. And what does that translate into? Well, you're going to take more risks, which is
Mhm.
where all the fun stuff happens. All the good stuff
Yeah.
happens where risk is being taken. That's my impression.
Yeah. No, yeah. It reminds me of, I did a talk this past Monday at, as you know, I have this role with the National Kitchen and Bath Association, right? So I represent the industry. It's a term, but the Northern California chapter, I have a membership chair position. So this was at a local college, and they have it was a, yeah, that's right. It was a beautiful campus. It overlooked the the mountains of the San Francisco Bay, and big rooms, probably close to 100 people or more. And so I go there and do a short talk about the industry and the association. I've done a number of these, but this Monday, I've learned, like anything, the more times you do it, to your point about the messaging, you get better at it, right? And there was three other associations there. So uh, I went up first, uh, but I remember doing this talk before, talking about the industry and all the bullet points that, about the association. So, but I learned that the best way to convey something is with a personal story. So the better the better we get at our origin story, and you make that part of who you are, and then you make that related to whatever the topic is. And so recently I've been, and you've actually very, very instrumental in this, helping me with this, getting comfortable with talking about my past of increments of life, right? 10 years old, 20 years old, 15, 20. And so I now will start my I'll say, hey, I'm gonna tell you who my name is, blah blah blah. And but I start off and I have this picture of me when I was 10 years old, and I say,
Mm.
you see this? You know, I tell them, hey, I was dyslexic, and for you in the crowd, and it's surprisingly a lot of people, you could just see the reaction because they are, right. There's a population, and I
Hmm.
say, yeah, or neurodiverse. Well, it turns out, when it comes to reading it, or when it comes to my mind, my mind is processing about 1,200 images per second. I'm seeing 1,200 images a second, or excuse me, a minute. Yours average person is about 400. So really, really hard when it comes to reading and writing.
Hmm.
Turns out when it comes to seeing concepts or seeing the big picture, really good. And then I tell them I was a cabinet maker, and I use that to um,
It's
go
awesome.
from make
Yeah.
him. But the where I'm going with it, Mark, is that's a very effective story, because now all of a sudden there's some humility. There's some humility, and there's this timeline of why I'm here. And I tell them, hey, I'm not being paid for this. This industry has been very good for me. I went from a cabinet maker to selling cabinets. I sold a half a billion worth of cabinets. I have these patents, all this. Not to talk about myself, but about what this association has done for me in these different stages of my life.
Hmm.
And you could just see the expression, see how people are just hanging on to every word you have.
Yeah, the
That
other interesting thing about that, just as an observation, it's a great story, and I'm sure as you practice it, a couple things. One is you didn't want to talk about that at all 5 years ago,
No,
like
that's why I
at
give you
all.
credit for helping
And
me on that.
I'm not looking for credit. I just think
I
it's
know you're not, but
fascinating.
I gotta recognize it when it
No,
comes.
I appreciate that. The
Yeah,
other thing is what you're also doing, like right out of the gate,
yeah,
you're making it about them, right?
totally.
It's like, oh, I know exactly how this guy feels because I felt that way too. And
That's
even the
right.
people that aren't dyslexic or didactic or neurodiverse,
Yeah,
um, they have someone in their life that is,
that's
right?
right.
And
Right.
so everyone is empathetic immediately as soon, and
Immediately.
the picture's like icing on the fucking cake, right?
Well, the funny part about it is, remember, there's two other associations, sometimes three, that go up after me.
Yeah.
So I get to see the crowd difference between my story talking about the industry, and then I get into the opportunities. And here's another thing about leadership, and I'm very comfortable with this, and I think you are become too. We are in this, I believe, some of the most exciting times ever to live. I really truly believe that. And I'm speaking of the AI, and say, hey, let's just change the language, right? We refer to as artificial intelligence when it's really amplified intelligence. And for people like me, this is really exciting. And we're in the best country in the world. We're in the best place for innovation in the world. I think good leaders inspire people. Um, they're dealers of hope, the hope of a better day. There's a lot of negativity in the world, and good leaders have the ability to see the positive in the changes, to see how they could benefit from it, and giving them permission to fail, to come into the industry with no experience and bring their lived experiences and make the industry better. Like you're inviting them in.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
so yeah, it's back to like you said, it's leaders are important, and if you don't have people that are out there talking about the opportunities and seeing the the uh, the optimism is contagious, just like pessimism is.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's really they are the drivers of the culture, no matter
Yeah.
what the entity might be, a team, a group, a company,
Mm.
an enterprise, doesn't really matter. And I think the we are lacking in leadership from my view and have
Mhm.
been for a long time. And I think that back to the statement we talked about earlier that we didn't conclude is, are they born or are they made? And I think they're
Mhm.
both. And I think what I mean by that is, in my estimation, and I think you and I take this for granted, not in a bad way. Just we were born leaders, so it was like, well, isn't everyone? No,
Mhm.
you see that over time. I think that you have to really be
Mhm.
comfortable with the
Yep.
reality that you are responsible now for the well-being of the lives of other human beings.
Mhm.
And I think that's an untenable burden for most people.
Mhm.
So there's a group of people I think that you could train to be leaders because they're willing to take on that responsibility.
Mhm.
They just don't have the experience or skills yet, but they can be developed.
Mhm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes total sense. Like you said, you could create a framework, but also an environment to be authentic in leading in your own way. I think when you become credible is when you're believable. But when if you're just, let's just say repeating a script, we talked about this, right? Whether it's the red team and the blue team, if they're just repeating the same script, and even though it's not true, but they're just been told to, and they say the same thing, and it doesn't make sense, eventually you're going to lose credibility, and eventually people won't believe you, and you can't lead. And that, going back to your point about we don't have very good leaders. This generation of leaders has been terrible. I'm
Yeah.
speaking mainly of the politics.
You
Uh,
know, a couple of the last companies that I was inside of, figuratively speaking, I could see what was going on with communication. I could see what the culture was like. I could see the various disciplines they were practicing and how people interacted together. Because I've walked into so many companies, and you have too,
yeah,
but you can tell in 5 minutes, what the culture's like. And it's like, are
yeah,
people smiling or are they not smiling? Right?
that's right.
Are they
Yeah,
talking to other people or are they not talking to other people? Are people
yeah,
pulling into the parking lot early and leaving late, or they,
yeah.
they're getting out of there, they
Oh,
get
you
in
can
at 9
tell.
and they're out
Yeah.
at 5. There's all these little indicators, right? And
Hmm.
it's like the problem with most of these companies is there's a wall between leadership and workers. And what I
Hmm.
mean by the wall is there's either a disinterest, which might be arguably worse, or a fear of sharing
Hmm.
ideas.
Yep.
These people are told what to do,
Yeah,
and
that's a culture.
it's
Yeah,
totally a cultural thing, but
the culture. Yep.
it's much more common than not in my experience. And
Yep.
I'm talking
Yeah.
about over 1,000 different companies of all different sizes,
Yeah,
right?
and like you said, it starts at the top and then it filters down, and you can see it in the janitor from the CEO. I know because I as when I on my repping agency, I would travel all over the country and represent these different cabinet manufacturers, and one, it was kind of cool to see all these different factories, right? Some would be, you know, 20,000 square feet, some would be 200,000 square feet, and some would have 200 employees, some would have 10. But like you said, you could just feel the energy when you walked
Hmm.
in the office and when you
Hmm.
sat with the CEO or whoever it was at the time that was running the company. It was a cultural thing. We're going to wrap up. I got to share this with you. This is on the life. I was at like I said, a couple of events this last week, but talk about getting comfortable with saying the same thing, especially with when I say young people, everybody's becoming young. But when I'm speaking to a 30-year-old, I'll
Yeah.
just say a 30-year-old, right? Because they're 30-year-old, they're serious about life and business. Uh, I always make it a point, a little bit of humility, but a lot of truth to this. I say, because they'll say, oh, I really like what you're saying, or, they'll give me a compliment. I'll say, hey, you know what? You know what I know at this stage of my life? I don't know shit.
Yeah.
I really don't
Yeah.
know shit.
Yeah.
All I know is my life lived experiences,
Hmm.
and they may or may not apply to you. I've made a lot of mistakes.
Yeah.
And some things have worked out pretty well for me. But whatever you hear from me, I'm not saying I have all the answers. I have some outcomes that I'd like to share with you that may or may apply to your life.
Yep.
Um, but I really make it a point to say I don't know. I'm okay with not knowing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's
Yeah,
the most credible thing you can say in my estimation. I think that what you've
yeah,
hit on there is critical. That's the humility that you were talking about, which
yeah,
comes with wisdom, which comes with age, which
yeah,
comes with experience. But it
yeah,
also, there's a thread of self accountability throughout the whole thing. It's like,
yeah,
I don't, and when I used to tell people all the time, when
yeah,
someone says to me in an interview, and I've done thousands of interviews, I don't know. I'm like, unless this guy fucks this the rest of this interview up, I'm hiring this guy.
yeah, 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 yeah. I appreciate your comment, but I think it's not credible. But I don't want them to leave thinking that I'm Mr. Know-it-all. Like no, I don't know. I can't predict the future. And I also say, by the way, context is everything. If you're 30, your life situation at 30 is very different than 40 and very different than 50. So
Mhm.
I think we live life in increments of 5 years, but 10-year columns. So this may or may not apply to you at this stage in your life, right? Because as you know, and as you talked about earlier, as a father, you had to switch from being an owner, a CEO of a company, and then focus on your family. That was a different stage in your life, right?
Mhm.
That wasn't in your 20s, that was in your 30s. So I do think context is super important under leadership, that you're saying, I have life lived experiences. Yeah, there's some wisdom, hopefully, that I can share with you, but it doesn't guarantee it transfers over, right? And I think context of different stages of your life is super important. Like I said, I talked about the 4 seasons of leadership. It was the one you've learned enough, you want to share it, or you've been in enough pain. Those are the good leaders, where you've had enough pain, where you want to help somebody, maybe prevent them from experiencing those same pains.
Or
So
having a little less pain, it's just
yeah,
like, I think the credibility thing is big. For anybody who's in their winter now, just the only thing I would say is that this too shall pass, and I know that from experience.
yeah,
And then if you have aspirations to be a leader, we need you.
yeah,
So if you're willing to take responsibility for the lives and well-being of other people, we can teach you the rest of the stuff. And I mean we collectively. There's plenty of us out
mhm,
there. And
yeah,
before I forget, Jim, we're going to start asking people for the favor of reviewing the podcast and giving it stars over at the Apple podcast area there. It really does help us. And apparently, at different levels, 10, 20, 30, 40, 100, whatever the levels are, all of a sudden the magnitude of our reach, the podcast can be heard by thousands more people, like
mhm,
with the click of a button. It's pretty powerful. So if
mhm,
you're inclined, if you enjoy it, and if you know anybody that might benefit from it or get a kick out of it, share the links with people. And
yeah.
that's I'll leave it at that. It was as
Yeah,
always
yeah,
a
I
pleasure.
appreciate you saying that, Mark. Also, just to add to what you're saying, it also inspires us, right? If we know somebody values the content that we're creating every week, then that's our compensation. It's not the monetary compensation. We're not being compensated for this, but if we know we're having an impact, then that's our currency. And
You and I have both had those experiences, and they're wonderful.
yeah,
They're wonderful. Yeah.
yeah,
Thank you
so,
for saying that.
yeah. All right,
Okay.
Mark. Until next week.
See you, man.
See ya.